What's up and welcome to the video. So we're going to talk about the Galaxy S24 Ultra. I've been using it for a few weeks now and it's really good. The S23 Ultra was also really good, but I think Samsung's now at a point where they're just taking last year's phone and trying to push it further and further to the perfect slab smartphone, which isn't really a bad thing. Samsung definitely made some improvements here, and that's what we're going to start with. So let's get into the details of the S24 Ultra. From a visual perspective, you're going to have a tough time telling apart the 24 Ultra from the 23 Ultra, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I personally really like the way the 23 Ultra looked, but one way that you can tell them apart rather quickly is to take a look at the curvature of the display. In the case of the 24 Ultra, finally, thank you, Samsung, there is no curvature to the display. So it is now flat, which I really like. And of course, it's still best in class, but Samsung still made some improvements to it. So 6.8 inches, WQHD plus resolution, super fast ultrasonic fingerprint sensor. But here's the cool part. Samsung made it brighter, up to 2,600 nits peak max brightness, which is insane on a smartphone. Not gonna have any issues with brightness, whether you're indoors or outdoors. And they've also added this like anti-reflective property to the actual glass of the display. So whenever you put it under harsh lighting, it doesn't reflect or glare as much as other smartphones. And that's really noticeable. You might not notice it if you're strictly using this phone on its own, but you take any other smartphone in today's day and age, put it up next to it, you'll see just how much the other phone reflects glare compared to this one. So it's definitely noticeable, but still absolutely best in class. Another very subtle change whenever it comes to the build of the phone, and I feel like, so we definitely saw this coming whenever the S24 Ultra started leaking, but yeah, Samsung took a small page out of Apple's book, and the enclosure on the 24 Ultra, just the Ultra, is now made out of titanium. And I say that this is a very subtle change because unlike the shift that I noticed going from 14 Pro Max, this is the iPhone, 14 Pro Max to 15 Pro Max, that was a dramatic difference in weight because you're going from stainless steel to titanium. Going from S23 Ultra to 24 Ultra, you're not going to notice a difference. As a matter of fact, the 24 Ultra is 1 gram lighter than the 23 Ultra because you're going from aluminum to titanium. I love the titanium frame. It feels great. It looks great. You're probably not going to notice unless you go looking for it, but it's there. It's cool to see, and it's really not going to make that much of a difference, even from a weight perspective. It's kind of a meme, but still really nice. And of course, whenever it comes to the internals, there are your typical year after year refreshes. So as opposed to Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which was great, we now have Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is also great from a performance perspective. Whether you're multitasking, whether you're doing 3D gaming, it can handle all of it. And that is paired to 12 gigs of RAM. And from a battery perspective, things actually remain the same, but again, that's not a bad thing because the S23 Ultra had a 5,000 milliamp hour battery and the S24 Ultra brings back the 5,000 milliamp hour battery. And from a battery life perspective, I was wondering if I was going to see some improvements since we have technically a more power efficient chip in the Snapdragon Gen 3, but my battery life was right around the same as what I was getting on the 23 Ultra. So I had absolutely no problems, 100% power user, all of the features turned on. Brightness cranked up to max, display resolution cranked up to max, always on display, always on, and I had no problem getting through one day. If you're a little nicer to the phone, let's say, you can definitely make it to 2 days, but of course all of the battery and charging great aspects are there too. So you have 45 watt fast wire charging, 25 watt wireless charging, you have reverse wireless charging, so whenever you need to top it up, it also charges very quick, but it's also very powerful, and it lasts for a very good amount of time on a single charge. So again, best in class. And interestingly enough, from a camera perspective, not only does the camera module itself look exactly the same as last year, the vast majority of the lenses that you're going to see are similar to last year, except for one. So let's run through them. You still have that absolutely insane 200 megapixel wide angle lens, which does pixel bin down to 12 megapixels, and that's totally fine. Honestly, I'm no professional photographer, so there are a lot of situations where I'm going to enable the full 200 megapixel mode. You do have a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle lens. You have a 50 megapixel telephoto lens, well, periscope telephoto lens with 5 times optical zoom. And then you have another telephoto lens that isn't periscope, and that's 10 megapixel with 3 times optical zoom. So that was a lot, but what you need to know is the only lens that changed is the 50 megapixel 5x optical zoom periscope telephoto lens. Last year on the S23 Ultra, we had a 10 megapixel periscope telephoto with 10 times optical zoom. So there's a lot of numbers, but if we're all keeping up with each other here, it basically means that on the S24 Ultra, you're swapping a higher megapixel count for less optical zoom. But what this means is that whenever you do zoom in and you take those photos, it's going to result with a sharper image, like especially once you crop into the photo. I've taken a couple of pictures on this phone. Again, I'm no professional. I'm very much a point and shoot camera user whenever it comes to smartphones. And this is a really, really versatile camera system that I have had no problems with. It honestly, from a performance perspective, has always reminded me a lot like the iPhone, where I know regardless of the shooting situation, I'm going to get a picture that I'm happy with. Although in true Samsung fashion, a lot of photos are going to be very saturated, they're going to be punchy, they're going to be vibrant. I've always said the types of photos that you want to print out and hang on a wall, it's going to be one of the best smartphone camera systems that you can buy, as long as I would say your top priority is not the most true to life accurate colors. You're going to get absolutely beautiful pictures, but if you're looking for the most color realistic, you're probably still better off with something like a Pixel 8 Pro or even something like an iPhone. But either way, one of the best in class camera systems. And of course, we are in the year 2024. Artificial intelligence is absolutely skyrocketing from a popularity perspective. So of course, we all kind of expected Samsung to kind of jump on the AI train. And honestly, I think they've done a really good job of incorporating some pretty helpful features, and you'll find a good amount of those in this phone, in your settings, and it's under a tab called Advanced Intelligence. So Samsung isn't calling it artificial intelligence, they're calling it advanced, but it's all still driven by AI. And like I said, there are some really cool features built in. One of my favorite ones, and you'll also see this in like the commercials for the phone, is the ability to live translate whenever you're talking to someone on a phone call, not just in the translator app as an interpreter. Like that's there, but this is for a phone call. It's really cool. You can go in, you can select your language from a list of available languages that they have. You can even select the voice style and the tone of voice, and it's really cool. You can basically just, as you're speaking to someone in your native language, it translates to them, and as they speak back to you, it translates into your language as well. That's really cool. And there are other features too, like whenever you have your voice notes app, it uses AI to do a better job of distinguishing between multiple speakers. It can summarize, as you're using voice notes to capture maybe like a lecture whenever you're in school. And AI has also extended into just the dedicated notes-taking app as well, doing a much better job of summarizing notes that you might have into paragraphs, bullet points, creating custom headers for you, summarizations for you based on what content you have in your notes, correcting your grammar and your spelling mistakes. I mean, it's kind of everywhere on this phone, and it's even gotten to a point where Samsung is not only borrowing certain AI-based features from Google, but in my experience, because I still have my Pixel 8 Pro, they're also implementing them faster on the S24 Ultra, which is really impressive. So the two that I'm talking about specifically are, you can now replace the Google Assistant with Google Gemini, which is, their ChatGPT equivalent, their AI tool online, which is really cool. And I think my personal favorite, Circle to Search, which is essentially just Google Lens with a little less steps involved. So anytime you have something on your main screen, you can push and hold either the home button or your navigation bar at the bottom, and you'll see this really cool animation pop up on your screen. You can circle whatever you want to search, and it'll basically search for that online for you and show you the most relevant results. It's all really cool, and like I said, I saw those features pop up on my S24 Ultra before I saw them pop up on my Pixel 8 Pro, which is pretty wild. And AI has even made its way into the Gallery app in a couple of different ways. So let's just say you want to make some basic edits to a photo. You can literally just swipe up on a photo you're looking at, and the phone will use AI to kind of recommend certain enhancements. So the most popular one that I always see is remaster, and it's just a touch up of maybe the colors or the brightness of the photo. And it gives you a really nice view of the before and after. You can choose to save it. But let's say you have a subject in the photo, a clear subject, you might see a recommendation to add a background blur, even if it wasn't originally a portrait photo shot, which is really cool. I've also seen other recommendations like erase reflections or erase shadows, and in those instances, the phone will allow you to kind of circle or touch on the reflections or shadows that you want to erase, and it uses AI to erase them and also fill in to try to make the picture look a little bit more natural, which is awesome. But if you want to take it a step further, you can open the dedicated editing menu and you'll see a blue icon with some stars in it. And that is generative editing using artificial intelligence. And it's very similar if you've used the Pixel 8 Pro to that feature. So you can move your subjects around within the photo. You can remove them entirely. You can change the way the background looks. You can use generative fill to fill in the background if you move your subject. There are a ton of different possibilities. And the coolest part is that for just a short amount of time, these AI features were exclusive to the S24 lineup, but with an upcoming update to One UI 6.1, these features will also be available not only on the S23 line of products, but some tablets and other products within Samsung's category, which is, it's just really great to see that it's not going to be tied to the latest and greatest, which would try to force you to buy it essentially. And while we're on the topic of One UI 6.1, because software has always been a slight pain point whenever it comes to Samsung smartphones, Samsung is now making a very big promise of 7 years of major OS support, as well as 7 years of security patches. So hypothetically speaking, in the year 2030 and beyond, like to 2031, the S24 Ultra could be running not just the latest security patches, but the latest and greatest version of Android, which is going to be great if you're not someone who likes to update your phone every 1 year, 2 years, 3 years even. You can buy this phone and know that if you want to, you're straight from a software perspective for the next 7 years. So AI features and now even software support and longevity starting to look a little best in class there too. I'm impressed. And all of this really culminates into a smartphone that will cost you $1,299. And that doesn't really take into account just how aggressive Samsung can be from a trade-in perspective. For example, I had last year's S23 Ultra that I traded in for the 24, and not only did I manage to get this phone at essentially 50% off once my trade-in was applied, but Samsung threw in a bunch of pre-order bonuses too, like a case, a screen protector, other different accessories for it. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I also even got like the second generation of Samsung's like smart tagging device as well. So Samsung looks to be pretty aggressive in trying to get people to upgrade to the 24 lineup. But I will say this, if you are someone that has an S23 Ultra, like I'll put it to you this way, if I had my S23 Ultra and this was not something that I like to do in my free time, I don't think I would be upgrading to the 24 Ultra, especially after hearing that Samsung is going to bring all of those cool AI features to the 23 Ultra. Now, of course, if you want the slight change in the camera system, if you want the flatter display, then by all means, go all out. But if you have last year's model, I still think you're in a really, really good spot. But at the end of the day, if you have a $1,300 hole in your pocket and you absolutely have to spend that money, this is about as close to the perfect Android smartphone that you can buy. It's definitely setting the expectations very, very high whenever it comes to 2024 Android smartphone flagship phones. And of course, we have a lot more content coming down the pipe. So if you enjoyed this review, consider hitting the subscribe button down below if you're new. Let me know what you think about the S24 Ultra. Be on the lookout for the other phones in this segment as well. We'll be covering in the 24 and the 24 Plus. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you here very soon. Peace.